Who are you? You might answer that question, who are you, in many different ways. You might start with your vocation, or your vocation prior to retirement. You are an architect, a bookkeeper, a carpenter, a teacher. But beyond that, who are you? When people don't know you very well, one of the first questions they usually ask is, well, what do you do? I have a home in Hamilton, lived there for many years. If you don't know about Hamilton, it's 90% Roman Catholic. And my wife Sherry grew up in that town, and it was a bit of a scandal that she married an Episcopal priest. So in Hamilton, I never wear my collar in Hamilton, never. And when people ask me, well, what do you do? I say, I run a nonprofit in Ocean County. That's the truth. And they usually don't ask any more questions. Also, though, if they say, who are you? I usually say, I'm Sherry Coletta's husband. Coletta has a vowel in the end. That means something. Terry Martin means nothing. Oh, Coletta, come on in. So anyway, it's funny how we answer the question, who you are. When we get past those career self-definitions, though, our next answers usually involve relational identities. I am Sherry Coletta's husband. I'm also a father, and a grandfather, and a brother. In fact, most of my identity, and probably your identity as well, is wrapped up in our relationships with other people. And I think that's as it should be. Our relationship with others is a high priority in our lives. Sometimes we like to talk about self-identity, as if this is something that we can personally develop. Years ago, I had a t-shirt with a message on the front that said, I've gone to find myself. If I get back before I return, please keep me here. Pretty silly. And I'm suggesting to you that the idea of any kind of personal identity is almost as silly. We are connected to one another. My identity is all wrapped up in your identity. Now you know what I'm going to talk about next. This is related to the Southern African term that I've mentioned before, Ubuntu. I am what I am because of who we all are. Or as Archbishop Desmond Tutu put it, one of the sayings in our country is Ubuntu, the essence of being human. Ubuntu speaks particularly about the fact that you can't exist as a human being in isolation. It speaks about our interconnectedness. You can't be human all by yourself. Our first lesson and our gospel lesson are, in a sense, stories of the devil's attempted identity theft. In the first case, with Adam and Eve, he is successful. In the second case, with Jesus in the wilderness, he fails miserably. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve had everything they needed given to them by God. They knew they were completely dependent upon God. They defined themselves in terms of their relationship with God. Their very identity was dependent on that relationship. Then, as the story goes, the devil, in the form of a serpent, starts questioning this identity. You will not die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Eat this fruit and you will be like God. If your self-identity changes and you become God, what need do you have for God? So the temptation to change their identity, to become their own God, was very strong. And so their relationship with God and their relationship with all of humanity and God was never the same. They allowed the desire for an enhanced self-identity to damage their relational identity with God. In our gospel lesson, the devil begins his temptations of Jesus with the words, "If you are the Son of God." Jesus is physically weak. He's been fasting for 40 days. The devil imagines he might be able to plant a seed of doubt in Jesus' understanding of his own identity, if you are the Son of God. But in response to every temptation, even in his weakened state, Jesus points back to his relationship with God in every response. One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Again, it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. For it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him. During this season of Lent, perhaps we can learn from this story of Jesus being tempted in the wilderness and recognize that our identity is defined by our relationship with others. And that as Christians, the primary relationship that defines us is our relationship with God. What exactly is this identity derived from our relationship with God? Paul tells us in his letter to the Romans, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ. We are the children of God. We are the adopted sons and daughters of God. That is our true identity. Now we will be tempted to lose this important identity. Each day we are bombarded with ads that tell us that we are inadequate, that we are just not good enough. What we really need is to buy this toothpaste, or this breakfast cereal, or this car, and then maybe our identity will be repaired. But without these things, we're unworthy. Well, when you see these kinds of messages, don't buy it. You are good enough because you are a child of God. I want you to recall a time recently when something or someone caused you to feel inadequate or unworthy. Well, guess what? They were wrong. At our baptism, God has declared us to be his beloved children. Always remember that when you get these negative messages from the world. Hold on to that identity that we are the beloved of God. And let the grace that flows from that identity touch all your other relationships. Allow the love of God to flow through you out into a hungry and hurting world. May we observe a holy Lent, resulting in abundant Easter joy. Amen.
Amen.